So I was involved in a fire shelter deployment in 2014, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about. It doesn't happen very often, and so we kind of have some conceptions about that, you know, number one, you probably screwed up, that's why you got to do it. Number two, they're probably not going to work anyway, and you know, there's just a lot about fire shelters that are still foreign to us. So having gone through the experience, I hope to share with you my experiences about that and how it can happen. This is my story, the Beaver Fire, Klamath National Forest. As Jeff said, I've been 40 years in the fire service. So I started when I was 17 years old, right out of high school for Cal Fire. Worked there a few years, did a lot of IA stuff. Then I went to work for the U.S. Forest Service. And then I was on an engine, but took opportunities to detail with the Hobart Hotshots, which are now the Tahoe Hotshots. And up until a few years ago, like 2014, the most significant fire I was ever on was the Hog Fire. And it was in the Klamath National Forest. It was August of 1977. But I was with the Hobart Shots. We were cutting line, and you cut, you sleep, you cut, you sleep. Not really sleep, but you just rest in line and get up and go. And about 3 days into this line, they didn't have the work-rest ratios they have now. It was rest while you ride into the fire, and then work until it's out, and then rest to the next one. And about 3 days into it, the inversion broke. And when the inversion breaks on the Klamath, you know it, because you can hear it a long ways away. And we ran to a safety zone. Now, I'm about 19 years old at the time, and we got into this safety zone. Is where a dozer cleared the brush out from under the trees, but he couldn't push the trees out. So it had a canopy in it. So I don't know a lot, but I don't think that's good. And the superintendent said, dig a hole, get a partner, take your shelter out and hold it, and then when I tell you, we'll deploy them. I'm thinking, this is probably not good. Luckily, there was a wind shift, and we got up and ran, and were able to get out of there. But that was pretty significant to me early in my career. So, and again, I'm back on the Klamath, the Beaver Fire, in August of 2014. It was a lightning fire that started on July 30th. The team was requested on the 31st. I was at a retirement party for a friend of mine in Mill Valley. Jeff Davidson retired there as chief, and we were talking, got the call there that evening, report to Wairika at 1 o'clock the next day. So we show up, and in order for a team to take over a fire, there's some legal paperwork you got to do, the declaration and the authority of delegation to control the fire on someone else's jurisdiction. So there's always a meeting where you go to, they call it the in-brief, and you sit down through that. But the ops guys, they always say, okay, get out to the fire, get some SA, see what's going on. We'll meet up with you at 1800, put our plan together so we can take over the fire and have things going on. So that's what happened. I show up, get there, me and 2 other division soups go out to the fire. We meet with the Type 3 IC. He gives us a pretty good report about what's going on. The fire is right here, is all that burns. So when we showed up there on the 31st, the origin is right here. They've got a control line underneath the heel of the fire, working up the right flank, and not much work on the left flank. The fire was small. There were no structures threatened. They didn't have very many resources, but they had a good plan together and were working on it. They had 3 private dozers from the Fruit Growers Logging Company, and they were pushing line. And they had 1 dozer from the Klamath, and a few crews and a few engines working on it. So it was one of the better in-briefings I received from a Type 3 IC. Pretty good plan together. Everything's going good. We decide how many divisions we're going to need. So we're going to need a division in here, probably 4 divisions. Can box this thing in, should be able to pick it up without too much problem. We go back. Before we left, around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, started getting some torching going on, isolated tree torching, and then that would just throw embers out and cause more spot fires. Things were getting a little hectic, so I said, hey, it's time for us to get out of the way and let the guys do their job and get back down. So we saw some pretty significant fire activity. What we later found out that Oak Knolls is kind of the location on Highway 96 where this is located, and that's the home of the Klamath Hotshots. If anybody's familiar with that, it's 30 miles west of Wairika on Highway 96 along the Klamath River. What they told us was that In all the years that they've been doing weather at the Oak Knoll Station, this was the lowest recorded rainfall they've ever recorded. And there had not been a significant fire in this area of the forest in over 30 years. So you have a combination of some good steep terrain, very dry ground, and lots of fuel. As we get back down to the ICP and meet with folks, within an hour or two, this fire starts to make a run and come off this hill down into Beaver Creek. And that's what this drainage is here. So everything we put together changed. They had to do some immediate evacuation. This area in here, where that little green island is going up there, is just full of homes. So for quite a few days here, this area, I was the Beaver Structure Group. And we didn't lose a structure in there, did a good job, took care of things. This later turned into Division Victor, which you can see there barely, which goes all the way out here to the Hella base. So I worked on that section for 13 days, so I'm kind of familiar with what's going on, that piece of ground and the folks' resources I had working in there. That whole east flank of this for 8 days had only a division group supervisor, had no resources, because this was the lowest priority fire in the state. If you were on fires in August of 2014, once you got past Red Bluff, driving up I-5, there were columns 360 degrees around you. They were everywhere. And this one was closer to Oregon than anything else and had no real threats going on until it made this move. Well, about day 8 or so, this starts approaching the CAL FIRE DPA. So all of a sudden, some of their resources became available. That division group supervisor received 9 dozers on one day. And he had been flagging ridges. It would burn over, he'd back up, flag another ridge, they'd burn over, he backs up, flag another ridge. Then 9 dozers came up. And so they got some good work done on this east flank and tied this thing in. They brought fire down to Highway 96. I took fire down here around this subdivision in here and tied all this back in. And it was setting pretty good. That side of the fire looked good. In the meantime, this fire just keeps working its way to the west, which is uncommon for this area because most of the fires have an influence up the canyon, up the river, and it wants to push it to the east. But this fire just kept going and said, well, if we can get by a couple more days, then we'll get back into the natural weather and this thing will turn back into itself and we'll be able to hook that west side up pretty good. On the night of the 10th, I finish up as Division Victor and go back into we do a post briefing when you're done. Division soup is like, they get up and they eat breakfast at 5 o'clock, then you have a pre-meeting at 5:30, and then you have a briefing at 6 o'clock, and then you brief your folks after that, then you go out and see what's going on, then you get all your folks back in, then you go to a post-briefing, and then you eat, and then you go to bed. So we come in for the post-briefing on the 10th, and our medical unit leader, or actually the planning ops, hands us this I call it the next of kin notification form. You guys probably filled those out. It says, here, you need to fill this out. I go, why? Is tomorrow going to be a tough day? Oh, no. He goes, just, some people left, or the past medical director left, and we don't have any current files, so we just wanted to renew everything. We thought this would be a good day to do it. So you got to sit down and fill this form out. But anyway, so that's the night of the 10th. So I wake up the morning of the 11th, do that breakfast, 5:30 post briefing, walk into the meeting room, our pre-briefing, and they say, you're Division Charlie. I go, Charlie? There wasn't even a Division Charlie yesterday. So I go, where's that? They say, oh, it's right here. I said, wait a minute, I was up here, and this is right here. Now that's 17 miles of roadway difference from one side of the fire to the other. Just kind of put it in perspective. I said, what am I doing over here? Well, you got this contained in Victor. It looks pretty good. So this fire, we had a line. You can see this ridge right here. We had a dozer line up there, and it slopped over it. And we're not going to be able to pick it up here where we thought, so it's got to come clear out here in this big box. They're talking about this box here, which is actually the box they used on the Gap Fire last year to tie back into this. But there's a whole new subdivision out there. You did such a fine job with that Beaver Creek subdivision. We want you to go in, put a structure plan together, figure out what it's going to take to do that. okay, so I get my IAP, actual one, and I turn to Charlie. And so the first thing I say, well, what are my resources? And it says to be assigned by operations. Okay, so it's me by myself. Oh yeah, you got about 2 days before they get there. I got that straightened out. Say, okay, I'll go out and do an assessment. Well, the night ops had pre-moved some people in there, and they had a strike team leader go in and do some pre-assessing of what structures were in there and what they were doing. So he gave me a map that he had drawn on a piece of paper at night. It was a beautiful piece of work. And I said, okay, I'll meet with him. So I go out and I meet with, first thing I do when I leave camp, I go out and I meet with the night strike team leader. It was a Butte County strike team. And find out kind of, you know, where the issues were, where the main houses were, where some of the threats were. Who's the guy that's lived there the longest, that knows the most about the place, so you can get some information, and what house has the biggest garden and the largest dog that you don't want to go talk to. Long story short, I get that information and I end up talking to this guy, kind of tell him what our plan is and that we want to come off this ridge and contain this thing and get some local buy-in. He tells me about the last time that they've used that line, because he's been there more than 30 years, so he remembers putting lines in that held, and that ridge had held before, and he thought we had a pretty good plan together and things were working. So I go up into that Cherry Maple Ranch, and I meet with the owner there. He's a retired Cal Fire battalion, and he's got a few cows and about 6 acres of meadows and running water, beautiful place, got a pumpkin set up and a pump and hoses laid out. And so I talk to him, tell him he wants to know about the fire, and I tell him where it is and how it's going and the trouble we're having and what we're doing. And you know, bottom line short, explain that we're putting a line in across the ridge behind his house. And you know, if that holds, we got nothing to worry about. If it doesn't hold and it backs into his meadow, we got nothing to worry about. If it comes off that hill and blows into here, your house is still fine, but the barn's going to be a problem because he's got an opened-in barn. So it's got a peaked roof and 2 sides, and both ends are completely open. Not just a gable, I mean wide open. And it's got 30 tons of dry grass hay in there. So embers and dry grass hay don't work well. So I said, you know, we'll do everything I can. I'll get some resources in here and we'll get this set up. I said, okay, sounds good. Then I need to go back and meet with the branch director, because now we have branch 2s working this side. And he wants to meet and talk about plans. He goes, hey, I got you some dozers. He goes, remember that Lima strike team we had working over here? I said, yeah, know those guys. He said, they're available. Can you use them? I said, yeah. I said, you know, we can pick that slop over up that's up there and still put this line in. I said, and in fact, the best way to do it is if we offload at 96 and work up this ridge and just get a pilot line going in here, and then we can get up and pick that up because it kind of flattens out a little bit on top. We'll do that. Otherwise, they got to go way down 96 down here, cross a bridge, offload, and high track up this road. It's going to take hours to just drive up a Cherry Maple Road. So we put the plan together. Sounds good. I meet with the strike team leader of the Lima strike team. Tell him what the plan is, looks over, he goes, we drive out together, he looks at it, says, yeah, it used to be a Jeep road back the last time they used it until the Manzanita overgrew it. So that's a good plan, we'll put it together. And one of the dozers is a Nevada City dozer, a Nevada City operator, Andy Adams, some of you may know him. I'm pulling out, and he said, I go, oh, Andy. I said, don't forget laces, huh, when you get up there. He goes, you came back to tell me that? I said, you know, that's just my job. I got to do that. Okay, don't worry. So they take off and they unload and they start up. Then I meet with the Alpha Division Group Supervisor, Alpha has this stuff along the roadway here. And he says, I got a dozer that's at drop point 76 and it broke down. He said, they should be up and running around noon. He said, you should see them up there. I said, okay. So I make my way up to drop point 76, and sure enough, here's this dozer, and the operator's there, and he's working on it, and the mechanics are just buttoning up and leaving. He introduces himself. He says, I'm George Poe, and I operate this dozer. He goes, I got 40 years experience. I retired from Cal Fire, and he goes, I got a Dozer Boss red card, and I'm ready to get to work. I go, do you have an assignment? He goes, yeah, I'm supposed to high track all the way down the road, get on a transport at the bottom, be transported over to drop point 88 and start working for Alpha there. I said, okay, I thought that was your plan, but that's going to take hours to do. So let me call Alpha, see if he still wants you to do that or if I can use you over here. He said, okay, good plan. I called Alpha, said he's ready to go, understands he wants him to come over. He says, if you can use him, keep him. I said, I'd like to put him to work on this line, punching down to meet with the 3 dozers I have coming up the hill. He says, go ahead, they're yours, switch them over to your TAC channel and you take accountability for them. So George says, well, I'm ready to go. I can get started when my dozer boss gets here, I'll go. And you know, with private hires, you got to have a dozer boss with him just for the accountability and the safety part. And I said, well, we'll get ready, put things together, and let me kind of see how this plan's looking. And the dozer boss drives up. He goes, I heard you talking on the radio. I turned around and I drove back. And he introduced himself, Tommy Strotter. He's from Arkansas. And he goes, okay. And I explained to him what the plan is. You're to take George, work down this ridge, put a pilot road down or line in till you tie in with the 3 Lehman dozers coming up from the bottom. I said, then the 4 of you are going to go up, pick this flop over up, and then we'll improve this line back down the road. He goes, all right, that sounds like a good plan. I said, when you go down this ridge, I said, there's a number of areas where you can escape. You can come back here if you're not too far involved. There's 2 roads that come off of Cherry Maple Road that tie into this, and you can take those and go back over to Cherry Maple Road to come out. Because I know where those are. I go, you get down towards the bottom, when you get in this area down here, this drops right into base camp, where it says gravel pit right there. That's where base camp's set up. So it's just like an oak woodland, and you can just drive right off. Don't even have to push any man's knee out of your way. Because I know that. He goes, I flagged this line yesterday. I walked it out, so I know all those areas. And I know where I can put safety zones in. I said, all right, go ahead and get started. So he does that. So then Air Attack flies over, and I get to speak with him. And I said, you know, what's the opportunity of getting pre-treating this ridge that we're working on? I said, every day, you know, these guys are working, they're involved. A little wind comes up, it gets ahead of them. They got nothing to work with, no resources. I said, I don't have very many resources, just some dozers. If I could pre-treat it, it might buy me some time. So they had a trainee, and he goes, oh, we can't do that. That's 15 miles of retardant. We'll never. And he's thinking about from clear up here somewhere, bringing retardant all the way down. I said, no, I want to go from drop point 76, which is right here, down to the road. Protect the base camp, protects all the structures, gives us a good anchor point. And his supervisor comes on, who I know very well, Todd White. Mike knows him. He was a foreman on the Tahoe Hot Shots. He goes, hey, Tom, this is Todd. He goes, I think that's a good plan. He goes, let me get you a lead plane out and we'll take care of it. So, and then the weather changed and they never came back to do that. But I had told the folks, I go, watch for aircraft, because if I can get a lead plane in here and retard it, I'm going to paint this ridge. So that was kind of something we were working on. Meanwhile, this is a red flag day. Did anybody go on fires when we have red flags? Because that's when they burn. So, not that we should take that lightly, but this is another red flag day, like out of day 11. I think it's day 11 of red flags. But it's predicted for thunderstorms to come through the area, and we know what those do. They have increased winds, 360-degree outflow, unpredictable, go like crazy. So we have to watch out for those. So one of the guys said, well, let's have the meteorologists give us updates as things of importance show up. They can advise everyone, make sure everybody copies, and we can get a check back on it so nobody gets caught in the blind. Sounds good. So twice during the day they said, warning, 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 thunder cells moving through the area, expect strong outflow winds. All divisions check back, we check back. First was like around 10 o'clock. Then sometime around 1 o'clock it happened again. 60-mile outflow winds, could have golf ball size hail, could be unpredicted, we don't know what's going to happen, be alert. Okay, we all checked back. And when that last one came through, there were spot fires that developed below the main fires. So you'll see it later. But kind of down in this area, blew it out. Then the cell would move through, and the fires would get in alignment and burn back up the ridge. And that's what happened this. Then around 1500 or so, he says, no more storms in the area, should be normal fire burning. no more thunder cells, I guess would be the word to use. So we don't have to worry about those outflow winds that we had experienced in the day. I'll advise you if there's any more. And that was just a general message, so we got that. Then there's this house out here in section 3 that this guy calls everybody to says, nobody knows where I am, you need to come out here and see me. And it's in my division, so I get called from branch, I get called from the operations trainee, and then I get another call from branch. I said, it's on my list, I'm gonna go check with him next. So I said, okay, so I go out there and I find this road and I drive out, and I'm driving down this road and I'm thinking, this is just a terrible road. You know, you just get a feeling when you drive down here. It's rough, it's narrow, it's got thickets of trees right beside the road. There's no passing areas or pullouts. I said, I don't even know if I want to bring an engine in here. And after about 2.5 miles in, here's this ranch. And it's beautiful. And it's got a new house under construction, another house that he's living in that's in good shape, a small cabin type. He's got some equipment sheds that, you know, like 3 sides and a slant roof, and tractors and graders and dozers. And he's just cleared all the ground litter away from everything and done a good job. And so I saw it, and I get out and I look, and I said, I don't like the road coming in. It's the only way in and out. But this is a safety zone here in itself, and I'd be comfortable to keep an engine here. So, and if you're not here and embers fly, they're going to go in and burn those things up, because you can do all the clearing you want, but the embers fly, and you'll see some in the video. That, you know, and that's why we do what we do. So I get in my vehicle and I start to drive out. Now I got a GPS unit and a Garmin, you know, like everybody. And I turn it on because I want to get a waypoint of this place, and I can get it on the map. And I just said to myself, I'm going to turn the tracks on, just leave the tracks on. I never do that because it looks like spaghetti when you get back. But our GIS guy's always going, bring me back more information than I need, and I can get rid of what I don't want. I thought, well, maybe it's going to be important. So I leave tracks on, and I start driving out. And I called Branch, and I said, he wanted to know how it's going. I said, we got a lot of stuff up here. I said, I really need some resources. I said, I'd like 2 strike teams of engines, any type. Because again, you know, I've worked in local government, and type 2 engines can do a lot of type 3 work if you can get them there. And these were good roads. And type 6 engines can work. And I got places I can use type 1s. I don't care. Just give me people, and I'll be a lot more comfortable. Ops says, well, let me see what I can do. We got stuff in staging, but I don't have anything I can commit. So the branch director sends me the entire Victor division, including the division chief or division group supervisor. And the good thing about that is that division group supervisor came to our fire as a structural specialist. Just another box, you know, you can get through NWCG, so you can go out, assess structures, put a structure defense plan together, and kind of do what I'm doing, but because I'm a team guy, I'm doing it, and he's not. He's mopping up the area that I already put out. So he brings his folks over, so I know what he's doing. One of the strike teams of engines he has is a Nevada County local government strike team. Guys that I used to work with, I used to be their strike team leader, and I know the leader of the strike team. He was a captain for the U.S. Forest Service, so he's got a lot of wildland experience. He's just grumpy like a lot of those guys. So Victor calls me, he's on his way, said, I'm on my way. I said, I'm at this location. I want 2 engines and the strike team leader here, and you to deploy the rest of the engines below this point where the road turns off that section 3. He goes, I know exactly what you want. I'll meet you. I said, take care of those other engines first, then we can meet up. He said, okay, got it covered. So the engines come up, and I meet them at this road that goes off of Cherry Maple into this house out in section 3. And I know that the engine captain, I said, Dean, I said, you need to drive in here and assess this. I said, I've done it, but it's your call, it's your engine, it's your folks, and you're familiar with them, and I'm not. I said, this is what I found. The road's terrible. If you stay and you get burned over, you can't leave. You have to stay there. You have to accept that there's a safety zone there for you if you're in there. You go in, make that assessment. If you're comfortable with that, I support you staying there. If you're not, back out. I don't have a problem. He said, okay, I understand. Went up to Cherry Maple Ranch, kind of told the next engine the same thing. Here's what you have. You got meadows, you got a pumpkin, you got all this stuff around you. I said, you do have an opportunity to get out of here unless the fire comes down below us, which it shouldn't because it's way above us. And, you know, so you can make that decision. And they both looked at it, they both called me and said, we accept the assignment, we're good to stay here, it's not an issue. I said, okay, understand. The strike team leader and I went back up to drop point 76. And we're looking at this fire. So 76 is right here. And we drive into the fire's edge because Alpha now has already pulled off the line. They said it's spotted. The integrity of what they're trying to do direct underneath this wasn't safe, so they've had to back out. And he says, I got a spot fire out here below you, and that's why we pulled out. And I called the Lima strike team leader. I said, can you see that spot fire? He goes, yeah. It's 2 ridges over and it's burning uphill and not towards us. We're still safe in what we're doing. I said, okay, we got good eyes. If anything shifts and comes our direction, then we're going to evacuate this line, back out. So we drive in. See how I shift gears? If you ever get lost in when I'm talking, just stop me because I don't know where I am. I have so much fun doing this. So we drive in. It's like 1.5 miles into the fire's edge from our indirect line. And we get there and it's just a flanking fire kind of coming towards us. About 1.5 feet. You know, it's on both sides of the road, so I drive through it. I turn around, I come back, I hit a waypoint, you know, I stop right on the fire's edge. And he goes, hey, what are you doing? I go, I got to get a good waypoint where the fire's edge is, but it's hot here. Oh, relax, Clint, come on. So I get a waypoint and I drive back, and then Branch calls. He says, I'm on my way up. Don't do anything. And we're looking at this thing, you know, yeah. Can we put some fire down? Can we, you know, fire out this indirect line now that we have? What other opportunities do we have to increase our chances of being successful? And it wasn't a good scenario. Short needle stuff that's not going to burn real well. It's not going to carry in. We're not going to get depth. You can dry stuff out. Just trying to put this plan together. So we wait for Branch to get there. And Branch gets there. And in the meantime, this fire is picking up intensity. Because it kind of rolled down in here, and it's still burning uphill, up this direction, but it's just getting hot and it's getting loud, and if you've been around big fires, you know you're too close when it's hard to talk and it's getting loud. So at 5 o'clock, I say, I think we need to back off this thing. We got to pull out. You know, we don't have good safety zones in here. We don't have resources to support the activity we're doing. It's still real safe what we're doing right now because the fire's burning uphill away from us. But let's just go ahead and pull the resources out. We'll back up and get the big box in play. Branch agrees with me. So Branch leaves. Victor leaves. Strike team leader leaves. I call the Lima strike team, said we need to abandon the line. Said you can either drop off into base camp or RTO back to the highway. They say, yeah, we understand. We're going to go back to the highway. I call the private hired dozer and the HEQB, the heavy equipment boss. I say we need to abandon the line, give them the same things. I don't know where you are on the ridge, but you know, you can either come back or not come back, but you can go out one of the roads or go down into camp wherever you're closest. And he says, we're in a safety zone. We'll just stay here. It'd be our safest spot. I said, well, okay. And that just didn't seem right to me. And so I turned to the branch director and said, I got to go down and check on him. It just doesn't sound right. And just instincts. So he says, okay. And so they leave that way, and I drive down the dozer line. Now, I'd already confirmed that I could drive down it because I asked him about getting Type 3 engines down, getting buggies in there to get crews to work, to do some improvement. And he said, nah, I wouldn't bring an engine in, but you can drive a four-wheel drive pickup down here without any problem. So I said, okay, I can drive to him. So I start driving down to where their location is. And this is right around 5 o'clock at night. Before I get to them, I see the fire make a downhill run out the driver's window. So it's still on what's going to be the black side of the line. But it actually passes my vehicle and turns and goes down a draw as I'm driving. So I know now that it's already crossed the road behind me, but now it's burning downhill in timber faster than I'm driving going down the road. So I didn't have a real good feeling about that. When I pulled into the safety zone, it was a little bit bigger than this room. And then I had a worse feeling. And the HEQB walked up to me and I said, make it bigger. I just rolled down the window and said, make it bigger. He goes, how big? I go, as big as you can in the time that we have left. And then he started pushing. And then the accelerator came up on the dozer and he started pushing faster. And then at one point, I'm assessing 1,000 things. Should we try to fire out? If it doesn't burn good, it's just going to dry the stuff out. It's going to be more intense when it burns through. If it gets going too good, it's going to draw the fire to us quicker. All these things are going on, trying to figure out where's the best place, what's going on, knowing the whole time that we're going to have to deploy because we don't have a safety zone, and just trying to put together how to make that plan work. And I look over, and he's got his iPhone out, and I said, son of a gun, he's taking pictures. I go, boy, every fire death report that I read, and I read a lot of them, always criticizes people for taking pictures of the fire because if they wouldn't have been taking pictures, they could have been doing something to save their lives. And I thought, if I take pictures and die, they're going to criticize me for taking pictures and die. If I don't take pictures, how are you going to ever know the type of fire behavior that we're experiencing coming at us? So I chose to take pictures. I later found out he was taking the video and put together this next video that is part of the FLA, which is the Formalized Learning Analysis. And so it's on YouTube and it's available. But it's kind of real time from about the time I got there and until we deployed. So you'll see kind of just how fast this goes. And listen to the video. It comes on after a few things, and you'll hear me at one point tell him, I'm sorry I got you into this. And you'll hear his response. So there's the little spot fire off that what I talked about earlier. This is across the river looking back up at the fire. 4 o'clock here. Okay, well, RTO back down to where you started because it's got a hard downhill push to it. 52, crew 52. Do we have to go through communications to get those? Okay, Raymer, go ahead. So you're going to stay in place, eh? Yep, I'm staying with the boys. We're getting pretty good ember fallout. Yeah, we need to boogie out of here. Hey, Ray, are you on deck? Good. Hey, well, me and my engine we're good here. We are good. Sergeant, you with us? Yeah, I'm going to stay with them. We're good. Okay. I'm not sure if we can do anything with this place here. 52, crew 52. Also, it's here. You might want to keep boogieing. Engine 52, crew 52. Get to the engine, face to face. Woo! Hey, Victor, let's go.
Yeah, we do. That's going to save us, I think, get some heat off of it. Ah, hell, this is nothing. Woo! Dang.
Victor on track. How you doing up there?
We're doing good, sir. We're doing good. Everything is good.
Alright, everything's passing by now, correct?
There's still one more coming down that road, about halfway past us now.
Alright, roger that. Everything okay? Building work?
Affirm. Everything is good.
Alright, you got the resident up there, right?
Correct.
Alright, roger that.
My other engine 9.
That tree was standing during the burn over. We pushed it over because it was burning and leaning right over us after we came out of the shelters. So that's drop point 76. FLA is going to fly the road that I drove to the deployment site. Deployment site will be right up here. So that's my vehicle, me, the heavy equipment boss, the dozer, and the dozer operator. So a lot of things went through my mind. When I pulled up there and saw the site only about this big, I thought, we're not going to survive this. So I radioed communications and gave them our lat long. And I did it honestly believing that that's where they'd have to come and find us. Not that it's just a spot to mark a map, but that's because we wouldn't be able to communicate with them, that this is probably where we're going to perish. It was one of the hardest things I ever did. And I couldn't say, north 131 degrees, decimal such and such. I just said the numbers, dash, dot, number, and just very digitally said them out. The ops chief later said that that didn't sound like you on the radio. I said, I just wanted to get you the information because I didn't want to tell you this is where I'm going to die. I just wanted to tell you this is the location. And the safety officer came on right after I did that, and he said, hey, you really need to take in consideration the plan that you have in place and make sure that doesn't interfere with your escape route time, so that you don't get over-involved. And Steve Davis, our safety officer, John and I both worked with him for a number of years. And I just said, Steve, this is where we're going to stay. And that's all I said. And he goes, I understand. And I felt bad about that. I said, because I knew that we were deploying. And I said, should I have told you? He said, no. He goes, but I knew you. As soon as I got off the radio, I went over to the IC's table and said, are you hearing what's going on? They said, yeah. Because I think he's in a tight spot. He went back. He immediately ordered 2 airships for evacuation and 2 ground ambulances, none of which he was able to receive. The ships were grounded because of the unstable atmosphere. The ground ambulance wouldn't come because he ordered them to stand by for a burnover, and they won't respond for standby. If he would have requested them for evaluation, they would have came. Just terminology, he couldn't get ground ambulances in. The only thing he was able to get was the Kern County ship was in Reading and with their hoist, and they came in and landed at the ICP, the only resource that came in. But, I didn't want to tell them ahead of time. Number one, I didn't think it was going to be 10 minutes from the time I quit talking to them to the time that we're in a shelter. And then them to be worrying, my guys to be worrying, me to be worrying that, that we're in a tight spot. I didn't tell the branch director. You heard him say, so you're staying there? I said, yeah, I'm staying here with the boys. Well, that was just kind of just talking, saying, yeah, I'm going to be here. And I didn't say, and we're in a tight spot, because I didn't want people worrying out there. Because you know how people get when they get worried. They can't think straight. So we didn't. We just stayed there. And so So shortly after I got there, I moved my vehicle to what I thought was the center of the safety zone or deployment site, so that because I knew it was going to burn all the way around it, and I wanted the best protection we could get. And I asked Tom, I go, "This about center?" He goes, "Yeah, it's about where we are." And I got out and I took my pack and I took my fire shelter out of my pack and I put it under my arm. And he goes, "You think we're going to need that?" I said, "Yeah, we're going to need these." He goes, "Well, I better get mine out too." So he grabbed his. I set my pack down. And then it was just assessing what's going on, where things at, where's George. And you saw me standing there and it was almost black and there's embers flying everywhere. And you notice the wind's going one way and then it turns and goes the other way. Well, it wasn't that hot. And like those first people that you saw when we started this program, you don't want to be that guy that's got to deploy a shelter. So you're hoping that, okay, if the wind sucks it back in, maybe it'll push and go around us. Maybe it'll die when it hits that trench there. All these great hopeful feelings that you have that you're not going to have to deploy. And we waited till it was too hot to survive without deploying. And I turned to him, I said, "Now." And we deployed there on the ground. They asked me later, they said, "Did you grab the right tab with your right hand and the left?" I said, "I pulled the red tabs. I put my head in the shelter and I dove to the ground because that's how hot it was. And I kicked my feet into it. And I don't know if I had it forward, backwards, or inside out, but I got into it. And I got in it, and Tommy couldn't open his because we're out there holding it, which is one of the things you don't do. It kind of shrink wraps in, so when he pulled the red tabs, all he had was red tabs and a shrink wrapped fire shelter. So that's why his camera's going like crazy as he takes his knife out to cut the plastic off of his fire shelter so he can get it deployed. And he got it out and then got in beside me. And the wind was blowing so hard. Oh, wait a minute. So where do you deploy? In the vehicle, out of the vehicle. Advantages to both. I have a gut feeling my vehicle's going to catch on fire, and I don't want to be in the vehicle if it's on fire. At least if I'm outside on the ground, I can crawl away from it. At least that's what I'm trained and taught, right? And sure enough, it caught on fire. And you saw, I got to be prepared. I got like 8 cases of water and a case of MREs and a case of fusees and drip torch fuel and drip torches and everything in the back of that truck. So I know it's going to catch on fire. No, it was an ember that blew under the toolbox, maybe an oak leaf or something that was up underneath there that's real hard to clean, in that spot where you got to pull the bed liner out to get to. That caught on fire. That caught the bed liner on fire. And then, they put these on an assembly line, so they pick them up and set them down, so they got to have a place to grab them. So there's a hole there. And it's just got a little rubber seal to it, and that burns through. And it lines up with one that goes into the cab. So it burns into the back of the cab, and then it comes up underneath the back seat, and then up over the headliner. I'm glad I wasn't in the vehicles, because when polyurethane seats burn, what kind of gas is that? Hydrogen cyanide. You don't live very long breathing that stuff. I'm glad I was out on the ground. In the shelter. I've trained with big exhaust fans blowing on you. On the lawn, of course, because that's comfortable. But we're on fresh dirt. I couldn't hold the shelter down on me. The wind was blowing so hard. And you just get it sealed this side, and then that side would come up. And at one point, I was laying just on my right side to hold that right side down. And I got the vehicle on the right, giving me some protection. And it's pitch dark. And then when the flames came over, it's bright red. And you knew we were under there. And as soon as we got in there, I radioed communications. And they didn't answer. No kickback. Channel 1, that's communication channel. Nothing. Oh, yeah. I'm 17 miles to the west. Got to go to channel 2 for a different repeater. Turned to channel 2, called them. They answered. I said, Division Charlie, we've deployed shelters in the location I gave you. Oh, okay, can you give us an update on what's going on? So we're taking heat from the east side. We're holding our own. Okay, very good. But you got to slide the radio out to talk to them. Otherwise, you don't get anything when you're into that shelter. You guys have been taught that, right? And I got an antenna about that long on my King radio. Slide it out, talk, and then I pull it back in, and then I fight to hold it down. And then it got hot. And I mean hot. And this is where I still struggle with my own feelings because I was pretty sure I was going to die. And the only reason you have these nice silver things is so it's easier to find you. But I didn't think it was going to be that uncomfortable. My gosh, I take a breath, and it not only burned your throat, but it burned all the way down in the pit of your stomach almost, just hot. And I said to myself, because you know the kind of guy I am, if you don't get up and get out of here right now, you are going to die. You have to get out of this environment. And then my training said, hey, dumbass, I can relate to that. If it's that hot in here, you can't survive outside. You got to relax, you got to slow down your breathing, and you got to get lower to the ground. And I remember crushing my helmet as hard as I could into the dirt, and then reaching my hand underneath my nose and digging the dirt away so I get my nose below the dirt level and to make myself breathe slower. And then I called Tommy. Tommy, you okay? Yep. He goes, we're good. I said, this is the third wave now of heat that's hit us from 3 different sides. And you can't even tell which way it's coming from. It's just all mixed up. I said, this wave is going to pass just like the other 2 did. We're going to be okay. He goes, yeah. He goes, we will. And at one point I wanted to look out and check on my truck to see if it was on fire. And I touched the inside of the shelter with my back of my hand, because that's kind of how they teach you to teach, see if it's cool enough to get out. And as soon as I touched the inside of the shelter, I burned my hand. It was like just laying it on a frying pan. I said, wow, that's hot. And I kind of picked up the corner, and it was like a torpedo blowtorch, just blowing hot air, and put that back down. If it's on fire, too bad. You can't go out there. It's not a good environment. And it's dark, and you don't hear anything. And finally, after the 3rd wave, it got quiet. I touched the shelter, and it was I could touch it. I lifted up a little bit, and it was warm, but it wasn't hot. Sure enough, my truck's on fire. There's flames coming out of the bed. I get up, and I keep my shelter wrapped around me because it's still hot and it's still smoky. And I go around, and I got a Class A extinguisher and a 20-pound ABC extinguisher right in the back, hooked on the toolbox. So I grab the Class A, I unhook it, and I pull it, and all that Gatorade and water and MREs and stuff I had shifted, and it wouldn't come out. So I put my shelter down on the ground, and I opened the tailgate, and I burned my hand on the tailgate, and I hollered at Tommy. I go, Tommy, get out here and help me. My truck's on fire. And pretty soon his shelter starts moving, and he gets up, and I see him put a dirt cloud on his shelter so it wouldn't blow away. And I'm throwing stuff out of the truck so I can get to the shelter, to this fire extinguisher, so I can get to the fire. And I get up there, and I grab the extinguisher, and I put the bed all out, and got that out. And I radioed communications. I told them 2 of us are out of shelters. We're doing good. We're going to check on George. And then I opened the cab of the door, and that black smoke just roared out. I go, Tommy, get that other fire extinguisher, because I'm just exhausted now. And he jumps up there, and he goes to grab the extinguisher, and an aerosol can goes off inside my toolbox, and the lid comes up, boom, and he comes up off the ground, and he looks at me. I go, get the fire extinguisher. Oh, yeah. So he grabs it, and I open the passenger door, and all those papers you saw, they just blew out, and they're all burning, and they're going through the sky. I go, well, there goes IAPs and 214s and maps and stuff. It's just going like a torch through there. And we're stomping on him, and he gets in the back and puts the seat out. And I go over, and I check on George, and I see his web gear. I see the dozer, and I get around back, and I look underneath the dozer, and the shelter's set up underneath the dozer. And I said, oh, George, are you all right? He goes, yep, can I come out now? Yeah, you can come out. So he came out, so I rated and told him that we're all accounted for. George had a little burn on the back of his leg above his boot where the heat had come in before he got into his shelter. And Tommy, we're sitting there afterwards, and Tommy goes, yeah, you called me. He said, I got up. He said, I wanted to help you, but my throat hurt so bad. It was so dry that, he goes, I had to get some water before I could do anything. He goes, but remember, he's from Arkansas. He goes, you look like a damn dog in the hole digging for a bone. There was shit flying everywhere out of your truck. I said, I understand. And I'll tell you what they told me what happened is that a cell collapsed that was east of Wairika, maybe 30 air miles away from our location. And when it collapsed, the outflow winds from that fire hit our fire and pushed it downhill. It burned 4,223 acres in 3 hours in timber, downhill run. The meteorologist did not have it on his on his screen. The fuels trainee had it on his screen, and he saw it because he was looking at a bigger picture. He goes, I wonder if this is going to impact us. It did. Calm is contagious. I knew that that we were in a bad spot, but if you don't stay calm, you can't work to keep things right. So I did everything I could to try and keep the other two guys calm and think about focusing on how we could improve our situation. Know your radio. So we have a Bendix King radio that we use all the time, including strike teams. I don't know what you use, but you know, when you're inside that shelter, you got that little backlight, it doesn't do any good. You can't see what channel you're on. So you have to know how to get a hold of people. You got to know how many clicks to turn to get to the command frequency. And that's when I turned it all the way to the left in channel 1 and hit it and nothing happened. I was able to think to go, oh, I got to click one more channel because now I'm south of the fire. But those are the things that'll make a difference when you're in a situation like that where it's hard to think about what's going on. For me, it was compartmentalizing the event. You know, like all those guys, I can't believe I'm here. What happened to get me into this situation? How do I get 2 of my employees, guys that I'm responsible for, into a situation where they got to deploy? And this can apply to you if you're an engine captain and you got your crew to a situation where they're in trouble. If you're the rookie firefighter in the engine going, why did my captain get us here? What are we doing? None of that will make a difference in how you survive or get out of there. You got to take that. For me, it was compartmentalizing, setting it aside and say, okay, what can I do now with the resources that I have right here to make a difference? And focus on that. And it sounds easy, but it's not. You heard me tell Tommy, I said, I'm sorry I got you in here. And when a battalion chief friend of mine looked at that, he said, that's when you were telling him you're sorry you're going to get him killed because you're all going to die, huh? I said, yeah, that's what I was thinking. And you got to get out of that. Okay, that's what I said. Now let's get back to what are we going to do? What's the plan we're going to have for deploying and where we're going to be at and how we're going to communicate that? Trust your instincts. You have instincts from the day you get out of the fire academy till the day you retire, and they keep changing. And you know, it's an ever-learning job. I always think the day that I quit learning something is the day I die. And those instincts will lead you in normally a safe situation. But trust them until they conflict with your training, then trust your training. It's that training you do every day that's going to make a difference in your survival. It's why you throw an air pack on every day without thinking about it and doing it. It's why you go through the drill of putting on a fire shelter. And it's knowing how and when to get out of that and when not to that made a difference in my life because I wanted to run. My body said, get up and run. But my instincts took me down there in the first place to tell these guys that, hey, you're in a bad spot, and we got to do what we can do to make it better. And with all that tracking I did, they were able to take that and just every minute of everywhere I drove, do a timeline of everything that happened that day and put it all together to make this report better. Trust your equipment. I was not a believer in fire shelters, and I am a believer in fire shelters today. They do make a difference. They can save your life. They will if you use them correctly. So don't think that you're getting into something that just makes it easier for someone to find you, but they will work. So let's talk about safety zones for a minute. How big of an area do you need for a safety zone? How do we know? Where do we go? What resource do we have? IRPGs, you guys carry these? Yeah, got them all today? No, I wouldn't either. It's raining. I think it's what, like page 8 or something? Safety zones. We know what a safety zone is, right? It's an area that you can stand with and not have to deploy shelter, basically, and let stuff burn by and be good. So the basic equation says that it's the separation shall be 4 times the flame height is the radius from you to the fire. That makes sense? Okay, so we know what the radius is. That's from me to there, and the whole circle keeps going. The diameter's all the way across. So half of the size of the safety zone is going to be from me to the flame height of the fire. How do we figure flame height? Huh? 1.5 times fuel line. That's kind of what I would do. That's the old school, what we were taught. What was the flame height of those fires that you saw in that video? Pretty tall? Could we say 100 feet and be correct? We know the difference between flame height and flame length, right? Flame length is this travels this way, and then flame height is from here to the ground. So how high it is. So if it was 100 feet in the air, how much separation would you need? 400-foot radius, 800-foot circle. How much ground is that? It tells you it's 12 acres. Okay? How long will it take to build a 12-acre safety zone at Aerojet? We don't have time. It's kind of I tell people today that if there's not a natural safety zone, you're not going to build one unless you've got a lot of equipment and a lot of time and you're way ahead of the fire. Because if you're out anywhere close to the fire, you don't have the time or resources to build the safety zone. So what did we build? Nope, you can't use that term. That's old school. That means you're building a place to go to prepare to die. It's a temporary refuge area. That's what they're called, and I love it. And when I did this for the IT meetings a couple years ago, Pete Duncan and I just had kind of a discussion about this, because if you have an opportunity to build an area, so I needed 12 acres, that was a half an acre. A half an acre saved my life. It could have been used for a lot of things. It could have been a drop point. We could have been a point where we could met and talk. If we had more time, there were other areas that we could have escaped if the time allowed us to do that. But that gives us a location that we can meet, and everybody knows it's a TRA, and it's right here. Build those when you're putting lines in. Know where those things are in your section. And if that's all you got, that's all you got. And you use it. How do fire shelters work? What temperatures will fire shelters protect you to? You know what your turnouts are rated at. You know what your helmets are rated at. What's your fire shelter rated at? Hey, I didn't know. I call up Missoula, and I said, hey, I'm starting to tell people about my experience, and and I asked this, and I get answers from 6,000 degrees to 300 degrees. I said, what's going on? He goes, oh, it's kind of hard to explain. Let me send it to you. So he sent it to me. And so I'll just read it to you. So hopefully now I'm going to read it so I get it right. So you guys know what fire shelters will protect you to. So in a lab test, fire shelters were subjected to a variety of tests, including radiant, convected scenarios. And in the radiant test, shelters were exposed to 40 kilowatts per meter squared of heat flux for 5 minutes. The current shelter showed a non-injuring rise in temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit and a heat flux of 1.5 kilowatts per meter square. An exposure of 40 kilowatts per meter squared would be fatal in an unsheltered human. In the convective test, shelters were exposed to flames of 80 kilowatts per meter square of heat flux and a temperature of 1,300 degrees for 20 seconds. The current shelter showed a non-injuring rise in temperature of 100 degrees Fahrenheit and a heat flux of 1.3 kilowatts per meter square. An exposure of 80 kilowatts per meter square for 20 seconds would be fatal in an unsheltered human. Now it gets to the good part. Limitations of the test facility prevented exposures for longer durations, but it is expected that a shelter could provide survivable conditions for an additional 10 to 20 seconds. And it's not uncommon for wildland fires to reach 150 to 200 kilowatts per meter squared of heat flux and temperatures of 1,700 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Flaming heights usually burn a site within 60 seconds. So does it make sense? I said, no, I'm more confused now than when I got the shelter. So what do we know? We know that if your body gets to 300 degrees, you're going to die. Okay, that much we know. So it's not so much the amount of flame temperature, but it's the amount of heat transfer. So how is heat transferred? 3 ways. We already said radiant because that's what the shelter is designed to protect. What are the other 2? Convection, and what's convection? Heat rising, basically, right? And the other one? Conduction. And in a wildland fire, we call that direct flame impingement. So, what difference does that make, John? I like to demonstrate heat transfer, because that's what we're talking about. So that this is you, and this is a flame. It is, I like it. We're going to try a conductive test, see how long you survive in conduction or direct flame impingement. Are we ready? But somebody want to time it? Ready, start. So let's try convection. So convection is heat rising, okay? Are you ready? We'll time this. We'll go here about 4 inches. Radiant. This is what our shelters are designed for. 360 degrees, we'll hold it over. So we're about 4 inches before. Let's try about 2. Okay, let's try the side. 1 inch away. Just in case somebody was sleeping and it didn't work. You can't not pop the balloon, and you're the winner. You get to keep your balloon. Or I can pop it for you. You can't pop that balloon with radiant heat. So what's that tell us? Number 1, shelters probably aren't worth a damn because there's only 1 of 3 ways they're going to protect us. But let's put that in perspective. All right. So what is conduction? Conductions are the flame hitting us. So when you decide you have to deploy a shelter, don't let flames touch you. Whatever you do, make sure that you provide separation. You don't allow flames to touch you. And the second thing is you got to get away from convected areas. That doesn't mean we're going to deploy on top of on a fire. It means we got to get out of chutes and chimneys and saddles in mountains and inside turns on the sides of hills. And areas that, for simple speaking, that if water runs down it, fire will run up it. You can't be there because the convection is going to kill you just as fast as the conduction will. You have to find a place where you're only going to be exposed to radiant heat. Okay, if you get nothing else out of that, of this whole discussion, that's important. Because if you have to deploy, think about conduction, convection, and radiation, and how you just can only survive radiant heat. So we add a little water to it. So we know that it's not going to pop from radiation because we've done that test with nothing in it and it didn't work. So as long as probably as long as we don't let the flame actually touch the balloon, then maybe we'll touch it here too. So we could put the flame on the balloon, have direct conduction going to the balloon, and see if we can make a mess of your. When's your board meeting? You got time to dry this out? Yeah, we don't care. Okay, it's not going to pop. I've seen guys take these on fires, set them in water, boil them, make coffee in them. It's always kind of weird because of the polymers and stuff that come off of plastic, but what's going on? Why isn't that working? The water's absorbing the heat. Okay, how does that apply to us in the field? If you can provide some sheltering, let something else absorb the heat, then you're not going to. If you get underneath that dozer and that big chunk of yellow McLeod is steel, is absorbing that heat, it's not going to transfer the heat to you. So inside the vehicle is good because it provides shelter as long as it's not going to catch on fire and burn. So it gives you some way to just further yourself away from that heat. So look at those things. All right, I can get to radiant, but now I want to get more sheltered so that I have more protection. And that's just the simplest demonstration that I can do to show you that just adding a little water to a balloon can make the difference whether it gets absorbed or not. Same temperature, same material, but it just puts something else in there to absorb that heat. Remember that engine that I sent into Section 3 to that house that was a bad road? When I came out of the shelter, Helco was on the radio, and they were talking to him. They said, you need to get out of here, and you need to get out of here right now because you're in a bad spot. Because he's over the next ridge over, and the fire's coming down the hill towards him. And he's a young captain, and he radios back to the Helco. He goes, can you clarify for me that the road into here is clear back to Cherry Maple Road? He says, and the Helco says, no, I can't see it under the smoke. He goes, then I will stay here. And what a good decision he made. But, is that a tough decision to make? Are you going to be confident enough in the decisions you make, not knowing what the ramifications of those are going to be later, and then as conditions change, to still be able to evaluate if that's a good decision or a bad decision? Because that's what we do. We make a decision, we test it, we see what the implications are, and then we reevaluate it, and then we put another action plan into place. What are we doing? So I was proud of him for doing that. A good call. One thing I preach today a lot is the acronym PACE, that you have a plan. And normally your plan is off the plan, the first one, your primary plan, that P. And then when you get out there and assess your situation, you start putting your plan together. Then you want to have alternate plan. So you have an alternate plan. If plan A does, if your primary plan isn't working, you have an alternate. If you're going to hold this ridge and it slops over, your alternate ridge might be, we'll go direct and pick flop overs up directly and do that. And if that doesn't hold, you have a contingency plan. And that's the next ridge back or the next road back, and we got resources back there ready to go and what to go. But what about the E? What about the emergency plan? How often do we put that in place? I don't think we do it often enough. Because what happens when everything goes to heck right now? What are we going to do, and do we know that? Some of you might have been up to the wildland drill we did in Nevada County last year. I talked about the Hasacita fire, where the Ventura engine got burned over on the Hasacita fire. And they were doing structural defense on a house, and they had their hose lays out and, kind of watching it burn down. They placed air packs inside the garage of the house. And in my opinion, they got overly criticized for that because the agency said it looked offensive, that they were going to stay there, even put air packs on to defend this house. From their standpoint, that if they couldn't get back to the engines, they were going into the house and putting the air packs on. And that's what the captain and the firefighter had to do. And they did that. And then as you read the report, the house was burning, and they went from room to room, kept closing it off until they had and finally the glass door broke, and they ran out and ran back to the engine with their air packs on. They both got burns, but they both survived. And I'm not sure they would have without those air packs. So I ask you to think about an emergency plan, something outside the box of what you're normally doing to do things. That's not operational, it's to save your life. And what are you going to do when there's nothing else to do? So think about that, because we don't want to think about that, and we don't think about that. Then when we're faced with a condition that we don't know what to do, is because we haven't thought about it. It is not a fun experience to go through a shelter deployment. It was probably the worst day of my life, to do that and to go through that. And John saw me afterwards. I was a wreck. I mean, I've been fighting fire for 40 years when this occurred. And I was a team member. While I was in the shelter, some of the things that went through my mind weren't, oh, hey, you know what? You're in a shelter. You're in good dirt. You're going to be fine. It was that 19 people just died in Yarnell in fire shelters, professional hotshots. What was it? 6 people died on the 30-mile fire. Or was it 3 people? I'm not sure the number now. I'm sorry. And the 30-mile fire came to mind because the year before I was on a fire, and the division group supervisors that I was relieving was the division that was responsible for going in and securing the site of the 30-mile fire in Washington. and preserving that. He said, you know, regardless what you read in that book and what happened, where those guys deployed, he goes, I wouldn't have thought a minute about deploying there. It was a good deployment site. He says it wasn't reflection of the rocks. It was convected heat that came over a saddle and then dropped back down on them. And what looked to be a good spot wasn't, because of the terrain features that they didn't see out in front of them. He goes, I wouldn't have thought twice about deploying there. And I thought about Yarnell and, you know, 5 guys dying without even getting their shelters on, just being exposed to heat. So what killed the people, the hotshots in Yarnell? We know now because we just did the test. Direct flame impingement. Their shelters got burned. They had conduction. That's what killed them. And we just talked about the guys on the 30-mile fire. They had a convected column come down, so convection killed them in their shelters. At Esperanza, where they had air ignition, it's either convection or direct flame. It's all the same thing pretty much at that point. But that's why they didn't survive. And I know that now from taking what I've learned from my experience and putting it into play. Anybody remember the Dude Fire? Payson, Arizona. Lightning fire started burning on a hill. And long story short, 6 firefighters from the Perryville crew died on that fire. But what killed those 6 firefighters? When the fire made a run, there were 2 crews working. And one crew ran down, and half of the Perryville crew ran with them, and they got out. The other half was separated by the fire and had to run up towards the safety zone. They didn't make it to the safety zone. They got to a spot where their superintendent said, you need to deploy. And they deployed. And 4 people did not get in their fire shelter, and those 4 people died right there. One of the other people got scared when it got too hot and got up and ran and died. The last person died because he thought it was time to come out, and he got out early and started walking and got within 200 yards of the deployment site and just fell over dead. So, I mean, we got to learn from these experiences. Got to know how to use our equipment. Got to know when we can come out, when we can't, not to be scared, but learn from their mistakes so that we practice and do things right. Because it's just not as easy as reading a book and saying, oh, okay, we can do that. And there's 100 other factors that, that led up to that. Poor communications, radios that weren't compatible. They had good equipment. They had basic training. They were an inmate crew. They weren't as much as a full-time firefighting as some of the other crews. They pulled firefighters off of a department to come in and do their fire management for them. All those other things. The bottom line was 4 people couldn't get in their shelters. 2 people got out early, and that's why they perished. It's a pretty traumatic thing to go through this, and I was pretty shook up for quite a while. And we went through a critical incident distress briefing, if you will. And one of the hard things I had to do was they just had an informal meeting there at the base camp for everyone that was exposed to this scenario. Can you imagine the 18-year-old girl that's running the radio while I'm saying, hey, we're in a fire shelter? And then when I pulled that radio back in, every 4 minutes they called me, and I did not answer because I couldn't hear them because my radio was inside the shelter, and I was fighting to hold it down. But they would call, and there was no answer. And they declared an emergency within an emergency. They switched everybody to the alternate emergency frequency, and they kept the primary channel open just to speak to me, and I didn't answer back for 15 minutes until I called them. So it's from them to the guy that I went to high school with, who's the liaison officer, to people like John that I've been fighting fire with for a long time. And I'm in this room, and there's 60 people in this room, and they're all there because of a decision that I made to send people down a line. And this is what I'm feeling. And I was feeling bad for all those folks that have gone through something that I was responsible for. And I was just sitting there crying and wanting to get up and run, and knowing that if I leave, those 2 guys are going with me, and they need to sit there. So we just sat there and listened to it. And then later that day, we had to go up to the scene. And I'm walking through camp, and I'm thinking everybody's going, oh, there's the guy. He's the guy, you know. And I'm like, you know, just, I have my team shirt on, and I put it on inside out so nobody would see the logo that know that I was the guy that caused that or was part of that. And I was just ashamed for everything that had happened. And then we went to the actual full debriefing, and it was really, really successful. And for me to sit down and say what my feelings were, and for people to share their feelings. And we all had very different reactions to this. And I think mine were what they were because I was the supervisor. I was more experienced. I should have known better. I should have been able to avoid this. I now know that I couldn't. It just happened. Sometimes those things happen, and it's a dangerous job we do. But when I left and drove home, John was nice enough to get me a new car because they totaled my truck. Windows wouldn't roll down. It was a smoky mess. But I drove home, and they said, "Are you coming back?" I said, "I don't know. I got to talk to my wife." I said, "I've been doing this 40 years, and I don't know. I don't know if I'm coming back." And it was the team members would call me at home and say, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm okay. I have a small ranch. I run a little cow-calf operation, so I'm working cows, and so I had a time where I was out of cell phone, so I was just at a cow camp working gathering, and then I was back, and then people from every aspect of the team, because there's like 60 people on the team. You got finance and logs and planning, and of course all the ops guys call. But the finance people were calling and say, "Hey, we just want to know how you're doing," and I just started feeling better. People cared. Had a guy call up. He's an ornery, crotchety old guy, Frank. He goes, "I wasn't going to call because I didn't know what to say," and he goes, "I didn't think that was a good reason not to call. So I call and tell you I don't know what to say, but how are you?" I said, "That's good, Frank. Thanks. I appreciate it." And it made a difference. And the department I'm at now, North San Juan, it's a volunteer, 100% volunteer department in the community I live. And after I retired from Grass Valley, I lived in that area, all my life anyway. So I volunteer there, and I train and go to fires and still do calls, and they still sponsor me to be on the team. But they didn't have a clue what was going on. "Oh, he's gone again. The truck's gone. Wait a minute, he's back. The truck's not." They didn't even know what happened. But I found that's not uncommon. A friend of mine had to take shelter on the King Fire, Corey Rose. He's a battalion chief from Los Angeles City, 4,700 employees. He got stuck, and the fire went up the Rubicon. He's sitting on the bridge, on the Ellicott Bridge, while the fire's burning by him. And he said, "I got to get out of my truck and get in the water." And that's what he did to survive that burn over. And when he got home, one guy out of 4,700 people said, "Hey, I heard you had an incident. Maybe you can talk about it this spring when we do our RT-130. He goes, "Yeah, I'd be happy to." Nobody said, "How you doing? What was it? What's it like? What's it like to think you might not live through this?" And that's our job. It's our job as in the department. I found when I was working full time, half the people were jealous I was gone because they didn't get to go, and the other half didn't even know I was gone. So that when something happens, nobody really knows what's going on. But we have an obligation to take care of ourselves, and that's what we can do better than anybody else if we remember to do that. Just take the time to check in, see how you're doing. No, it's the best career in the world, and it can be pretty hard on you, and we just need to take that opportunity and take care of ourselves. Thank you for your time.